Hey, welcome in everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here at WCNC Plus with your live weather impact. It is a glorious Wednesday. We have got some gorgeous views to show you. A lot to talk about weather-wise, actually. We've got some great weather and some big pattern changes happening going into next week. So it's been, I'll be honest, it's been kind of a boring weather pattern, but things are starting to get a little more interesting here in the long range. But we've got to start with this because this time of year is just gorgeous. Look at our views. Our Dallas camera, our Mr. Sparky camera network, looking off to the west. Yes, you're looking into the Blue Ridge Mountains, and if you look carefully, you can even see Mount Mitchell. Sometimes we zoom in, we can see Grandfather Mountain. You can see it from our camera there in Gaston County. But the beauty part here is 6:40, which is 9 minutes from now, sunset. So we're getting some great golden hour light out there right now, and not a cloud in the sky, which will be great for some comet viewing tonight, which I'd love to talk about more because I'll be out there again trying to get some pictures of that tonight. There's a satellite and radar. You can't find a cloud out there right now. Good luck if you can. Look at the cooler air. So to the north, we've got 40s and 50s. That's rushing into here. So I guess the weather story for the next couple of days will be cool and dry. Fire danger is an issue right now. We had an elevated fire danger today with temperatures in the 70s. That was part of it. But look at the dew points. That is about as dry as you're going to see it around here, especially in October. Dew points in the 20s and 30s, that is chapstick weather. And when temperatures are in the 70s and your dew points are in the 30s, your relative humidities, we call them RH for short, relative humidity, it's relative to the temperature, that really drops them down to like the 20-25% range. Throw in the fact that we had winds gusting at one point today at the airport. The 30 actually caused some go-arounds for some of the aircraft. There was a bad crosswind going into the airport today. You see all the dust out there. For a while, the airport was reporting dust, blowing dust, and it wasn't a dust storm. It's like, remember, they're building another parallel runway out there. So a lot of construction with the dry weather, it's really kicked up a lot of the construction dust. More than anything, that's just a sign of the strong winds and the dry conditions. As we look at the temperature forecast tonight, we're going to cool down quickly into the 40s. A crisp, cool night. That's typical for this time of year, but it will be chilly. You're going to want to have a jacket in the morning, a sweatshirt. But like today, one of those big diurnal changes from morning to afternoon, day to night temperature change could jump, in some cases, 35 degrees again. I think mid-70s for some neighborhoods, so a really nice afternoon. Should be a spectacular day. Now, the first time this season, we've got a freeze watch. What is a freeze watch? Well, essentially means the conditions are favorable for a freeze to happen tomorrow night into Friday morning. So Thursday night, Friday morning for the mountains. And you're probably saying, wow, it's early. It's actually late. The first freeze frost conditions in the mountains usually happen towards the beginning of October. Now, we've had some patchy events here and there, but this is going to be the most widespread risk for a freeze, which, you know, it's not a bad thing to have this late arrival because that means the growing season is extended. And we're nowhere near our first frost or freeze yet here in the Charlotte area, though we will see a lot more 40s at night than we've seen recently. So just prepare yourself now. Really, really good fall nights with chilly mornings and comfortable afternoons. Tonight, Comet Lemon is visible again, kind of moving more towards the west now. So I have northwest there, but notice the comet's going to be more towards the western direction, so right close to where the sun sets. And look for the Big Dipper, hour and a half after sunset. So think 7:45, 8 o'clock seems to be the sweet spot. I find 8 o'clock is like perfect. It's dark enough, but it's also high enough. It is low on the horizon. You can't see it with your eyes, so use a camera, even your smartphone, binoculars, telescope. Certainly helps out. If you don't see it tonight, you got more opportunities the next few nights with clear skies. But I probably would try to see it here the next couple of nights because it is pretty bright, and it's also going to get a little cloudier as we get closer to the weekend. So don't be surprised if we see a better cloud cover chance going into the weekend and early next week. Speaking of that, rain chances really ramp up late Sunday into Monday. And in fact, we are probably going to see the most widespread rain we've had in almost 2 months. That's how rare this has been this fall. Notice late Sunday, some green showing up there. I'm not forecasting rain Sunday because that'll be after dark, after sunset. Probably after midnight, to be honest with you, but some of it showing up Sunday into Monday. Where is that coming from? So let's show you Futurecast. We got to go way out in the future here. So this is Sunday morning. Notice we're completely dry Sunday morning. That's why I'm not buying any rain on Sunday, but that's the system right there. You see it coming in from the southwest. Look at this on Monday. That is a wet and cold pattern because high pressure is going to be over New England here. That's going to usher in kind of a wedge setup. And that's a lot of rain there on Monday. That's a good soaker. That's the perfect kind of widespread steady rain and cool conditions. Now, that rain will linger into Tuesday and Wednesday as a secondary system comes down from the northwest. Now, it does look cold enough. There might be a little wintry mix in the highest elevations, but it doesn't look like a significant winter event in the mountains. I know people on social media will try to blow that up, but just because one model run had snow there doesn't mean it's probably going to happen. Probably more of a hit or miss kind of variety. Then it dries out for late week. And why is that important? Because next Friday is what? Halloween. Yeah, so trick-or-treaters want the kids to have dry trick-or-treating. It's on a Friday, too, which is great. I mean, so the kids don't have to go to school the next day. So, yeah, it should be a great Halloween, though it will be chilly. So just parents, heads up, might want to have some blankets or some jackets ready for the kids, even with the costumes. It'll be chilly because when you look at the jet stream pattern, big dip in the jet stream. I mean, that's the reason the pattern's honestly changing. We just have not seen anything like this so far. I mean, at all since last spring. It has been such a long stretch. In fact, I can't remember last time we had a dip like this in the jet stream. You probably have to go back to March or early April. So that is a cool and wet pattern. So the story for next week is going to be chilly and wet. And look at this, the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook is below average, but the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook is above average. I can't remember the last time we've had that. So that is a huge change going into next week. So your weekend forecast, this weekend, that's a typical late October weekend. 60s for highs, morning lows in the 40s. Some of those mornings are going to be chilly. Let's look at your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day. The next couple days, probably the warmest we're going to see for a while because starting this weekend, we go cooler. And then next week, look at that pattern. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, wet and cool. As we go into the later part of next week, we'll show you the 10-day forecast. It does dry out in time for Halloween, but look at the high for Halloween, 61 with a morning low in the 40s. So that means trick-or-treating time around sunset-ish, you're probably looking at upper 50s. So just prepare yourself now for trick-or-treating in some cold conditions. But I'm excited because that 3 days of rain is exactly what we need. It will not end the drought more than likely, but this could be a significant dent in the drought with 3 days of widespread cool rain. It's not going to all fall at once either, which is what you don't want. And it's not downpours. It's going to be steady rain throughout the entire period. So we'll talk about the tropics. We'll talk about Comet Lemon. We'll talk about the wildfire risk and fall color coming up after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Tim Buckley joins me as always, Chief Meteorologist at WFMY in Greensboro. Tim, good evening. How are you doing today?
Doing fine. A little cold out there at times this morning. I think we're going to be talking more about the chill, right?
Yeah.
That chill is taken over and maybe the end of warm weather as we know it, Brad. The times are a-changing in a big way, I think.
Yeah, everybody always asks, when are we going to have full-time fall? And I always think there's no really such thing as full-time fall because it's always a battle. But there is a point in time when you get into the autumn when finally, okay, now a warm day is like in the mid-70s. And, we're past the 80s, we're past the 90s. So, yeah, it definitely looks like we're finally going to start, which is kind of ironic because it's kind of on schedule. Late October is when we kind of do turn that switch and finally get consistent cool. I'm also excited for the rain that we're going to get next week, which is also part of this pattern change. But the dry, cool weather has been a story today for us, Tim. About mid-afternoon, I start looking. I'm always looking at what we call the ASOS or the METAR reports from the airport, and I see blowing dust as the observation at the airport. I'm like, what is going on? And sure enough, we have major construction going on at Charlotte Douglas International. They're building an extra parallel runway, and because of the windy, dry conditions, Tim, there was dust blowing everywhere. So we've got some video kind of showing this.
Gosh.
And James was telling me too, we were watching it. Look at that dust. You see it kind of blowing around there. So they have an official observer at Charlotte Douglas. And so when they see dust, they reported it in the METAR, and sure enough, all that dust was blowing around. On top of that, there was a pretty bad crosswind. So for our pilot and aviation friends out there, they had a 30-mile-per-hour crosswind on all the runways today. So it was kind of a rough landing for a few of these planes, and some of them actually did go-arounds because they couldn't land correctly. So that was kind of an interesting setup. Yeah. And I know you guys had some pretty high wind gusts as well, and that was part of the problem with the fire danger today, Tim. This windy, dry weather led to a high fire risk. At one point, our dew point was like 28 or 29, so this air was incredibly dry today as well.
Very dry air, very low humidity, of course, the same thing. And with those gusty winds, fortunate that we didn't have any issues today, but I was telling our news team, this is just something we're going to watch, not even just the next couple of days, but really the next couple of weeks and months at times. Days like today, when you get behind a cold front, you tend to have that strong wind. And a lot of people are asking, where's that wind coming from? Why is it's sunny and windy? Well, you're behind the cold front, so you have new air moving in, but we're also kind of caught between two pressure systems with a high out to the south and to the west, and then a low up to the north and to the east. And wind is always driven by the difference in pressure, and so that's where we are right now, is kind of caught in the middle. But there were a couple of these prescribed burns, as we call them. The Forest Service uses them as a control tactic to kind of keep the fire risk down, I guess. But it always kind of raises eyebrows a little bit when they're doing them on days like today, because we're telling you not to burn, and then off they go. But they're a bit more professional than we are in our backyards, I guess.
Yeah, I get those questions too. I had somebody yesterday say it's too dry to burn. And I'm like, well, technically it's never too dry to burn. But the thing is, it's always a catch-22, Tim, right? Controlled burns, you don't want to do it on a crazy windy day, but the whole point of doing them is you need the fire to actually burn, right? So you have to have conditions that are somewhat favorable for the fire to do its job. You're just hoping to keep it controlled, and what you're trying to do is burn up some of the vegetation so there isn't a larger fire down the road. So when we see these on days like that, I know the first thing a lot of people want to say is like, why are you doing it on a high fire danger? Well, the whole point is to do it on a day where things burn. You can't do it during a rainstorm, right? You got to do it when it's dry and somewhat breezy. But our meteorologist, Becca Birdsall, did a story yesterday on Weather IQ about the wildfire risk. Actually, some pretty good interviews, Tim, talking to the North Carolina Forest Service about this ongoing issue you alluded to, that this could be a problem we're going to have to deal with not just now, but maybe all the way into next year.
The leaves are falling, the air is getting drier, and North Carolina's wildfire risk is climbing. According to the National Interagency Fire Center, abundant dead and downed trees left behind by Hurricane Helene are the perfect fuel for wildfire flames. Each month from now through January highlights North Carolina for an above-average wildfire season.
The main concern is definitely in western North Carolina, where we still have, in some places, excessive and extreme storm debris still on the ground from Hurricane Helene. And so we have an excessive fuel source.
That debris has been on the ground for more than a year, and Philip Jackson with NC Forest Service says it's ready and available for any wildfires.
It's going to burn hotter and spread quicker, but also there's an accessibility factor with all that debris as well. And there's harder to reach areas, and in some places we just can't get to the fire.
Fall fire season comes every year. Dry air, windy days, and all those fallen leaves bring extra fire fuel. Add in Helene storm debris, and even a small spark can turn dangerous quickly. The North Carolina Forest Service says 99% of wildfires in the state are caused by human activity, and most are preventable.
Debris burning, as you mentioned, is the leading cause of wildfires, and it's mostly due to carelessness. So if you are going to burn, make sure the day it's not dry and windy day. Preferably a couple of days after we've had some rain.
If you plan to burn yard debris or fall leaves, always get a burn permit and never leave a fire unattended. You can also protect your home by creating a defensible space, clearing pine needles, leaves, and flammable materials away from your roof and gutters. If you spot a wildfire, call 911 immediately, and remember, drones are not allowed anywhere near a wildfire. They can force firefighting aircraft out of the area, making the job even harder, and it's illegal.
Consider a wildfire to be a no-drone zone.
With the Weather Impact Team, I'm meteorologist Becca Birdsall.
Yeah, a couple points that I thought are really interesting about that, talking to them, and I heard this when I was up in the mountains for Helene coverage, was, I think immediately people think, Tim, like, got all this debris, right? You got fuel. But what I think people forget is the accessibility part of the Helene damage, because if a fire does start in a remote area, it's going to be impossible in some cases for firefighters to get and actually get control of it because the road is either blocked, and in some cases the road's not even there right now.
Yeah, and they've done a really great job to get a lot of roadways open that we use as passenger vehicles and things like that to get around. But like you said, a lot of those back access roads or things like that, well, that's not a big priority compared to the others. So that is something that could hinder fire efforts if we get one going. We hope not to. Maybe good soaking rain, like we'll talk about as a potential for next week. That could be really nice, but we probably actually need a couple of those wet weeks, not just wet days. We probably need a couple of wet weeks to help us out. We'll get new drought numbers tomorrow, and like you were saying yesterday, it's going to be a worse report than what we've had because it hasn't rained at all.
Yeah, what's interesting, the reason this is the fire season, even when you get rain in the fall and winter, because the vegetation's dormant and it doesn't hold moisture in it. I think we talked to someone from the Forest Service and said, I think it only takes 7 to 14 days of dry weather for all that fuel to dry out completely. So you want some consistent rain. To your point, is like it's great to get a soaking rain, but just get rain once a week would be great to help kind of keep the fire danger down. But speaking of something that will actually cause the vegetation to go dormant, we've got our first freeze watch of the season, Tim, and it's kind of interesting because this is kind of late for the mountains, actually. I looked back, and the average date for this first freeze is around early October, so it's a little late, but we're starting to see some of the first frost and freeze advisories of the season showing up.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's always kind of fun to track this on a big scale as well. These are watches and warnings that go all the way back to the Midwest, so that would stand to reason that for a big chunk of the country, it's the coldest weather so far. But yeah, it's maybe a little behind schedule, I would guess, and important to note that this is for tomorrow night, not necessarily for tonight itself, but it goes all the way through Friday morning. And I think it's going to be a bit of a close call. Up in my area, we're expecting some overnight lows in the upper 30s. Maybe not tonight, but tomorrow night and Friday night as well. So it could be bordering on some frost advisory territory for some areas. And I was telling folks, people always asking, what do I do with my plants and my flowers? Well, number one, if there's summer flowers, they're always going to die. It's just a question of when. So not much you can do about that. But if you have houseplants still out on the deck, I think it's probably time to make that big haul inside. A lot of them don't like temperatures much below 50 anyway, so that would probably be the time to do that, even around Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, whatever. No need to wait.
Yeah, the other thing you can do, and this is part of the dry part, is watering stuff heavily helps retain heat as well. And if you got something you can't move, if you water it really heavily the next couple of days, that would help kind of save it from at least a minor frost or freeze. The hard freezes, it's not going to do much, but if you want to extend the growing season, you definitely could do that. And sometimes that's all it takes is a good soaking and to keep that plant going. But it is getting towards that time of the year. This is the average frost freeze date map that we use. For the mountains, you're looking at October 5th or 12th, so we're behind. But for here for the Piedmont, including Greensboro and Charlotte, our typical first freeze is usually in early to mid-November. So we're still, we're definitely nowhere near that point yet. So I would not expect us to see anything widespread. But it is interesting. The question we get every year, Tim, is, why don't we have frost and freeze advisories throughout the winter, right? Because it's only issued when the growing season's going on. Once the growing season's over, it's kind of like it's a moot point. So once we get a good hard freeze, you don't see these advisories anymore.
Yeah, it's for growing stuff, right? It's an agricultural product at its heart. Just like in the springtime, we do it for those last ones that could help hurt the flowering trees or the crops or things like that. But this time of year, it's the opposite. You're trying to keep things alive rather than, I guess you're always trying to keep things alive. So that's what it's there for.
Yeah, time for the fall and winter gardens right now. So Tim, today I heard that you took a little jaunt up to the mountains to get some fall color. And I tell you what, some of the pictures we're seeing this week, especially now getting towards like the front range of our mountains, the foothills, starting to look pretty good. What did you see and where did you go today?
Looks pretty nice. So I went up to the Linville Gorge, which is actually much more than a little jaunt for me. So I got a nudge from a buddy to get over there, and I figured I'd just be tired today. But number one, it was really, really windy. So this is Hawksbill Mountain, if you're familiar with that area. Really a great hike. Boy, is it one of the best views. And there are a couple of other vantage points that you can look at up there. So I'm going to pull up on my box here. Hold on. There's my PC. So, James, if you're able to take my shot as well, you get a really nice 360-degree view from up there. So you get Table Rock out in the distance, the gorge over here. The color is popping pretty nicely, but it's also inconsistent, too.
Yeah.
So some patches are green, others are less so. And actually, I'll point out right here, this is a total scar from Helene. So all of these trees are basically down in that area. And then on the flip side, right on the other side of this ridge, you also have probably the best color that we were seeing up that way today. But just really nice views pretty much anywhere you want.
Wow.
That would probably be the best example of some good color. And that's Grandfather out in the distance over here.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about the gorge is when you get out that way, you can look back to Grandfather. You can look over to Mitchell. You can look down to Charlotte on a clear afternoon if you're able to, and also just into the gorge. So really a cool part of the state, and I think these are the elevations that you want to be focusing on right now. This is between that 3,000 to 4,000 foot range at the moment. So if you were up there this weekend, good opportunity to get into the gorge. Keep in mind, a lot of these roads are the unpaved ones.
Yeah.
And so you kind of need to have good vehicles. Although what I will say, I just drive a sedan. I got an Accord. So the road was in great shape to get to Hawksbill Mountain as well, and it's like 2 miles unpaved. They did a great job with that one, but I've heard the Wiseman's Peak Road or the Wiseman's View Road is not quite as maintained right now. There are a lot of ruts in it, so just keep that in mind. But the color's looking pretty good. It's not the best season ever like the fall color guy was telling us last week, but there's good color if you want to go seek it out. Just don't go up top because that's already done.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I think the Linville Gorge is one of the most underrated parts of our state. It's it's such a wild area too. Like you can go backpacking there and not see a single person and not have cell service or see any lights. It's just it's still one of those remote areas, but it also makes it a dangerous spot. So like driving's a great idea. I would not venture to hike unless you're experienced and you bring gear, because following the folks up there in Upper Burke County, they're always rescuing people, it feels like, because people get in over their heads trying to hike. And I've heard a lot of horror stories since Helene. A lot of trails are blocked and cut off, like you said. So just definitely check ahead of time what's open. Those are good tips, Tim, because there are some areas that people normally would hike to that you just can't get to because it's still covered in debris right now.
Probably sticking to the tried and true spots. Like go to Linville Falls would be great this weekend. That's a nice spot. You have a hard time getting a parking spot probably, but I can tell you Hawksbill was a fine trail. They maintained it pretty well. But whatever you're looking to do this weekend, again, probably just don't go up as high as the Parkway. A little bit below that is better. And I honestly think with these cold mornings that we have 3-4 cold mornings coming up. I even think around my area, Hanging Rock is going to start to be at peak pretty soon. Stone Mountain State Park as well would be a good option. South Mountains, I'm not so sure about them. They might be a good option pretty soon also.
Yeah.
Those are things to think about.
Yeah, those areas, I think in the next week or so, like you said, some of the typical hot spots around South Mountain State Park, like you mentioned. I think Crowder's Mountain over here by us, which is over in western Gaston County.
Yeah.
And then the cool part is you get into November, you start going over towards Uwharrie and Morrow Mountain State Park and areas in the Sandhills. Those actually get some pretty good color late in the season. Before we wrap up, I want to mention Melissa, because the good news, Tim, Melissa's not going to threaten us, but there's some indications that Melissa's going to be a pretty strong system down in the Caribbean. And we do have a lot of viewers and followers of ours that obviously do vacationing down in this area. So I've been getting a lot of questions about certain areas, the Bahamas, other areas. I think our biggest concern, Tim, and you correct me if you're wrong, I think the Cayman Islands and Jamaica right now would be two areas I would be watching very carefully if you have vacation plans down that way.
You don't want to go there right now.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And keep an eye on this if you have plans even coming up in like November or something, because the impacts could be really bad, whether it be from rain, whether it be from devastating wind. I mean, this is a big update that they put out, the Hurricane Center, earlier today. They're now explicitly forecasting what we call rapid intensification. Yep. So in this case, going from a Cat 1 on Saturday to a Cat 4 by Monday. And some of the guidance is even quicker than that. So this is something that we'll keep an eye on. There's a lot of disagreement behind the scenes of how's it going to turn, when's it going to turn, is it going to turn, and those will be discussions, I think, for the next couple of days, and we'll want to watch it because we got a weird upper low in the eastern U.S. next week that who knows what will happen.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier this week how warm that water is down there. So if the shear subsides and this thing gets vertically stacked, rapid intensification, I think, is definitely going to happen. Cat 4 might be like conservative, to be honest with you. It might be even stronger. And long range, we'll see. We know it's probably going to get pulled northeast, but that until it does, you can't write it off right now. So it's something to monitor, especially if you're traveling down there. We'll keep an eye on it. But as always, we're out of time tonight, Tim. Thanks again. We're going to stick around and have some more coverage here coming up on WCNC Plus, so don't go anywhere.